I guess first off, I want to say that I decided to just, I didn't write a speech or a talk today because I wanted to just be authentic and talk, really hear my voice. And the reason I did that is because I want, ultimately what I hope for you is that you learn how to be your authentic self and discover who you are. And so with that, I want to tell you quickly about my story. And the reason I tell my story, first of all, let me just start here. I really wish that I was in a classroom right now, hanging out with a bunch of super smart high school kids and having the interaction we normally do. I'll say that working with Yell and being in the classroom and hanging out with all these super sharp people and all the questions I get and just the engagement is one of the funnest things I do every year. I really, really enjoy it. And so I'll just start by saying if what I'm saying is interesting, or if you ever want to expand, or you need help thinking about your future or anything like that, you can email me at steve@natureofwork.co. That's steve@natureofwork.co. I'll put it in the chat, but I just want you to know that I'm always down to do whatever we're allowed to do in terms of being outside or going for a walk or something like that. I've mentored a number of students, and it's just one of the greatest pleasures of my life. I learned so much from talking to young people because frankly, you are growing up in a world that I didn't grow up in. Things have changed so much. And, my background is in technology and I know a lot about technology, but you are growing up in a totally different zone. And so it's always fun for me to just hear from you and engage with you in real life, not just like this. But I'll tell you quickly about my story. So first off, I was a musician all through high school and into my early 20s. That was really my main passion. I was trying to be a rock star. And I was deeply passionate about music. I played in a number of bands. I produced other groups and bands. And, it was all I really cared about. And, I went through my high school years. I got my B+ average because my mom would have killed me otherwise. So I got my grades and did my thing in high school, but really all I was passionate about was music. And I was super dedicated to it. All I really did was practice guitar, write songs, study music. It was just my whole life. And as I got out of high school, I had a couple odd jobs here and there. I worked for TD Bank for 3 months. But really what I started doing was learning on my own how to do things that people needed. And the first thing that I discovered was that I was a decent designer. And I learned how to use Photoshop and, all these tools and started designing for people. And then I started building websites. And this was in 2000. That's how old I am. I don't even know if you were alive. Probably weren't, I guess. But back in 2000, websites, it was the first boom of the internet. And I was building some of the first e-com sites for a lot of local businesses and things like that. And all of that I just learned on my own by studying, by just spending a lot of time practicing and trying things out and figuring things out. That was really how I learned. And in retrospect, I realized that I'm what's called an autodidact. It's somebody that learns on their own, that basically is self-directed in their study. And so I spent thousands of hours learning music. And then I spent thousands of hours learning design and technology and all of these different things. But I never set foot really in a classroom after high school. I guess I took Law 101 and I took a macroeconomics class. I took a couple classes. I went to 3 months of jazz school, realized that wasn't for me. I think what I just realized is that I learn by doing. And I don't say this to you at all to say that you shouldn't go to school, because I actually think for a lot of you, going to school, especially schools like SFU and what they're doing, is a super cool direction to go, and you can learn a lot and you build community. And it's amazing. But the reason I tell you that is that, I'll finish the story and then I'll tell you why I'm telling you the story. But basically I got into my 20s, started doing all that, started making websites, continued making music. I toured with my bands. I traveled to Brazil. I spent a few months there on my own. feel like that was a really important discovery of myself, traveling out, just being out in the world on my own and really figuring out who I am. And went through that phase. And then in my mid late 20s, I realized that music was just not going to be a thing. The rock star goal was just not going to be a thing. And in the meantime, I was getting really good at the technology side of things and design, and I was really enjoying it. And so I transitioned full time into that when I was about 27. And I started my first company with a friend, and we just started learning, and the company went really well and we were growing. And then after about 3 years of that company, what I realized is that my heart was actually in social impact. And the way I learned that was just because we were doing all this big corporate work, making all our money with big national corporations. And that was great. And they were nice people, and it was fine. But where I really got my energy, where I got my juice, was when I was working with little nonprofits and community-based organizations, and we were doing pro bono work for them. So we didn't get paid to do it, but that's where I spent a lot of my energy, and my mind space went. And so I realized that I wanted to try and make a living doing that. And so I tried to talk to my business partner about that. He didn't really understand that idea and was a bit, just didn't want to go in that direction. And so I left that company to him. I gave it to my friend, and started a new company called Brightweb. And Brightweb basically was founded on the idea that we were a social impact agency. We worked purely with nonprofits and foundations and some for-profit companies that had a social impact bent. But this was about 11 years ago. And back then, this whole social impact thing wasn't as mainstream as it is today. I think a lot of you already, when you think about starting a business or you think about working for a company, you think about companies that are doing good in the world. I'd say a decade ago, that wasn't really that common. And I had a lot of advice, a lot of people telling me that I was never going to be able to make any money working with nonprofits. It was a bad direction to go in. That I was being, I just wasn't, but really what I was doing, I was following my heart. And I just felt like if I could figure out how to make a living working with these types of organizations, I would actually wake up in the morning and be excited. And that was what was most important to me, is what was my experience of living? Did I enjoy getting up? Was I passionate and excited about going to work? Was I passionate about the people I was working with? That was so important to me. The interesting thing is that, like, when I followed my heart and I went that direction, it happened to be, a really good business move. It put me into a league of agencies that was very small. There wasn't a lot of agencies out there doing work in the nonprofit space. So suddenly we were getting calls from New York and LA and San Francisco and all over the States, Atlanta, all over the United States. Much bigger organizations were calling us to hire us. And so I started spending a lot of time in New York. We opened an office there. We started scaling. We turned into a multi-million-dollar business. And, basically we became a company with people working in 25 cities around the world. We were always focused on basically values, on quality of life, on friendship, on basically creating an environment where you can work when and where you find it most productive. And we had a lot of fun, and we had an amazing culture, and it continued to be successful. And so I say all of that just to say that, I think that when you're at your age, it can feel like there's only one path and one direction. And for many, the traditional path of going to college and getting a job is the right path. And for instance, the CPA BC is on here today. CPAs are super important. And if your brain thinks like an accountant, and you love numbers, and you're interested in operations of businesses and all of that, it's so important. People like me can't survive and can't thrive and grow businesses without great accountants and great financial advisors and professionals around me that help advise from that perspective. So there's a role for everybody. And so, I just like to share my story, because I hope that people understand that there's no one path, and there's no, it kind of feels like in high school, there's this thing where I don't know when it starts. I don't know if it starts right in grade 8 but there's always this talk about planning for your future, and you got to do this because it'll mean you'll get this, and then you go to college, and then this leads to a job. And it's kind of sounds like at some point, there's like a finish line where you're now a successful adult and all of that is done. And the truth is, life is an ongoing journey, and there is no clear line between being a kid and being an adult. There's just a natural maturation of your life, and you gain experiences. And I think the most important thing is that it's your life. And I want you to be successful, and I want you to enjoy what you're doing, and I want you to be passionate, because when you enjoy what you're doing and you're passionate and you're successful and you put those three things together, then you make a real difference in the world. Then you are really impacting everybody around you and perhaps the entire planet with what you do. And I think that's just so important. So just to say, like, there's lots of different directions you can take. I know that in my late 20s, when I was starting my first business, I looked back on my music career as a failure, as maybe a waste of time, as like, oh man, I could have been in school and I could have done this and I could have done that. But when I look back on it now, I learned so much in that time. I learned how to manage people. I learned how to organize events. I learned how to do marketing. I learned how to be disciplined and how to be creative and how to create music. And I just learned so much. I just learned it in a different way. And so for some of you, that will be a path, like some kind of path like that might be a better route than the traditional route. And for others, going to school is absolutely an incredible opportunity to meet great people and learn and see the world in a different way. I think the most important piece is that as you go, as you leave high school, there's a big world out there. There is an infinite amount of options and opportunities and different types of communities and different types of people. And you get to explore all that and find who you are and find your people in the world and figure out, there's so many interesting niches now, and technology and the internet and all of this has shifted the way that jobs go and the way that work exists and the way that the economy works. Like, there's just so much opportunity right now in the world that a lot of people that are older, a lot of adults around you don't even understand. They have no idea what Twitch is. They don't know what's happening with all these different interesting industries. They don't know that there's just all these niches on the internet and all these new things arriving. They don't understand what crypto is. They don't understand what DeFi tokens are. There's just, I could keep listing just things that are emerging right now that are huge opportunities in the world. So just get out and explore and make sure that you're having fun and that you're enjoying yourself as you go through it. If you find yourself in an environment that you're not passionate about, that isn't inspiring you in any way, I think it's important to really question whether you're in the right place. And that doesn't mean you need to be having fun all the time. You're going to have to do hard stuff. And there's going to be, there's going to be days where you're doing work you don't want to do to get to a goal or to achieve something. So that's not what I mean. I just mean that hopefully you're in an environment where you're around people that you value, that you feel aligned with, that you feel you care about and that care about you, and that you're passionate about what you're doing or the goals you're working towards.